All right, Sarah, how are you? Good to see you here back at our Logica YouTube Live. How are you?
Hi, Harry. Thank you for having me. I'm doing great. I'm excited about today's live.
Great, and you've been a leader here at Logica for quite a while now, and I know that you're leading our H-1B department. So I'm really happy to have you here to help us answer some questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's been a pleasure and learning. For the last 5 years, I've been working on employment-based visa, and we filed 100 of H-1B. So I'm very happy to be here today to chat about H-1B cap.
Fantastic. All right, so let's get into the questions now. Let's start with the first question on H-1B matters. So I know that recently we completed the lottery process, I think at the end of March. So presuming that our candidates have been selected, what should they do now?
So first of all, congratulations, because it's super hard to be selected right now. We have so many applicants. Last year, over 700,000 of applicants applied. So if you are selected, you are very lucky. However, this is just the beginning. Being selected doesn't give you the H-1B visa approved right away. We need now to start working on the case. So the first thing to do will be to reach out to your immigration attorney and start the process before the deadline.
Right. So this year we had people registered between what were the exact dates this year in March that people need to get registered?
So the deadline to register was March 22nd. It started on March 1st, and the lottery closed on that day. We got the selection notices late in March, way before the April 1st date that was previously announced. And
Yeah.
we can officially start filing cases, H-1B cases, since April 1st.
Okay, fantastic. So I know that we have several happy clients, in March, but of course it's a lottery process, so we can't promise that you're going to be selected. But however, maybe we could touch a little bit about the master's cap. What happens with the master's cap? Those who have advanced degrees.
Yes. So as you know, H-1B cap stands for a cap, which means that there is a limit. The total visas available is 85,000 visa, but 20,000 are only for those people who have a master cap or an advanced degree, such as a Juris Doctor or MD. So that's
Right.
what master cap stands for.
Right, or MBA, other advanced degrees. So that's great. So if you have that advanced degree, there's that 20,000 set aside just for you, which helps improve your chances of being selected in this very popular lottery. All right, let's go to the next question. All right, what documentation does the employer need to provide, and what documentation do I need to provide? So
That's
there,
a
so there, we're separating the employer documents and the candidate documents.
Yes, that's a really important question. As I was saying, the lottery is like the easy step. It's just about luck. But now this is when we start working on the case. On the part of the employer, it's very important to have a very good job description, job offer, sufficient documentation about the companies hiring you or the individual hiring you. And on the part of the beneficiary, we're going to focus more on the qualifications, any experience, any diploma that you have. And then again, it is really crucial to work with an immigration attorney to make sure that the job for which you are being sponsored do qualify. You may be selected in the lottery, but the job itself may not be good enough to get an H-1B approval. So,
That's right.
yeah,
That's right. So just getting selected in the lottery doesn't assure that you're going to get an H-1B, right? So and I think what you're touching on is a specialty occupation, right? So that
yes,
the job needs to be a specialty occupation, which means it's a job that aligns to the bachelor's degree or to the degree that for which the job needs that education to be performed.
that's right. That's right. So USCIS is going to review all the documents that we are providing and that we're working with, including an LCA that has to be certified by the Department of Labor, Form I-129 with USCIS, and additional evidence to prove that you actually meet those requirements, that you are qualified for the job, but also that the job qualifies for the H-1B and is indeed a specialty occupation.
Right, and I know that sometimes employers are concerned about their budgets too, and even though the person does have a bachelor's degree, they may want to give them a job that is not a specialty occupation. So I think it's really important that the employer consult with a lawyer, because if they give a job that doesn't require a bachelor's degree, or maybe it's just a high school level education, the case is going to be denied. So it's really important that you make sure the job is a specialty occupation, even if you have to pay a salary that is a little higher than you'd like. It's going to assure that you have an excellent candidate and that you have a long-term resource. And I guess just to touch one more point here on this question, documentation is needed by the employer. Maybe just a few items, Sarah. What would they be? What would be like those main documents that we typically see from the employer?
Okay, so from the employer, we typically see a job offer summarizing information about the position. We also like to add a letter of support and a detailed job description, so USCIS have enough information to assess whether the job is a specialty occupation. We also ask for some financial information from the company just to show that the business is real, operating. If they have any marketing documentation, that will be good to have. USCIS like to see that there is a real company and a good faith job opportunity for the H-1B applicants.
Yeah, and the federal employment ID number from the IRS is still necessary. And I know that many times we request the federal income tax returns to support the company is a functioning business. So those are things that sometimes employers feel uncomfortable sharing, but are necessary for this process. Let's go on to the next question. So is there a deadline to start the process? And I think there's a few deadlines, right? So go ahead, Sarah, let us know what they can be.
Yes. So this is also a tricky question because depending on your status, you may have your own deadline. But generally for H-1B, we have a filing window. We can start filing the cases starting April 1st. So it's been 24 days now. And the deadline to file the case is June 30th. USCIS will reject any case filed after that deadline. Then you have also that's why it's again important to consult with your attorney. Depending on your visa here in the US and your status, you may have to file your case before if you are willing to extend your stay in the United States.
So in other words, if your case was selected in March, you can jump for joy, but don't completely be happy, because you have to still prove the case by June 30th. So that's approximately 90 days, I believe, that the government gives us to demonstrate that the case is viable, or that the candidate merits that H-1B.
That's right. Yes.
And then what happens after June 30th? So supposing that the case was filed by or before June 30th, what happens then? Like, what are the deadlines? What if timelines are important here?
Okay, so as soon as the case is filed, USCIS takes approximately 2 weeks to issue and mail a receipt notice. This receipt notice will give you a receipt number and will allow you to check the status of your case online. It usually takes between 3 to 6 months on average. It's very hard to predict because there are a lot of changes with USCIS offices right now, and actually the forms and the fees has changed since April 1st. So we are not sure about the timeline and how long it will take for USCIS to adjudicate your case, but you always have an option to accelerate the process by paying an additional fee, which is a premium processing fee, and this will allow you to get a decision within 15 days.
Right. Thanks for mentioning it. I think it's really important that the people know about the premium processing fee. And I know that the fee went up it was $2,500. What is the premium processing fee now?
It's $2,805.
Okay, so it went up about $305, right? And that's for USCIS to keep up with the demand of work.
Exactly.
And inflation. Okay, great. Let's go on to, and I know there might be some questions coming in from the public, and we'll definitely address those momentarily. Let's go on to the next question. What happens if I change jobs during my visa period? So now you have a transfer. They want to move on from one H-1B employer potentially to another. So what happens there, Sarah?
So first, you need to make sure that your first H-1B was approved. You cannot start an H-1B with an employer that is not the one who was selected in the lottery. So we still need to file the H-1B CAP petition with the employer who sponsors you. And this job has to be real and a bona fide job opportunity. Once your H-1B is approved, you are always free to change employers at any time. that won't be a problem. It's going to be the same kind of not issue, but the same kind of challenge that you may encounter when you find another job. You will have to make sure that the job is a specialty occupation, that the employer is going to pay you the prevailing wage. So the process is almost the same, but as soon as your first H-1B approved, you are free to find another job as long as you meet those requirements again.
So you still have to meet the specialty occupation requirements, and the only you still have to file the whole I-129 form, just like you did prior, but you don't have to go through a lottery any longer. So that's helpful. But you still have to find an employer that is willing to file an H-1B, and that means that employer has to invest in the costs and also feel confident that the candidate is going to stay a reasonable amount of time working for the employer. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is if you're an H-1B employee, that yes, you can move, but your employer is making an investment in you, and you want to give them a reasonable amount of time to work, and hopefully you can have a long-term career at that company.
Yes, and this may make me think about, what if you lose your job, you lose your H-1B job. You can also still stay in the United States, and you will have 60 days to actually find another employer to sponsor you and with a good face opportunity.
Sure, that happens. And I know that early this year and early last year, or late last year, there were several layoffs in the technology space, many of them coming from the West Coast. And I think it's just the technology industry, they hired way too many people. And so there was a shedding of employees. And so as a result, a lot of H-1B holders lost their jobs. And I think they were able to quickly find new jobs because the economy has been pretty strong for employment. But if that happens, if you actually lose your job, right, you can't just do a transfer and begin working immediately. You have to, if you lose your job, you have 60 days to leave the United States, like you said, or to file a new petition. And at which point, after the approval, that's when they can begin working.
Yes.
Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, that's right. And we call this the H-1B portability as well. This allow you to, let's say you're gonna be terminated, or you are looking for another job. You don't even have to wait for the new H-1B to be approved. You can file your case and make sure that the case is received to start working with the new employer, as long as they meet the requirements and everything is done properly with an experienced immigration attorney. You can benefit from the H-1B portability and start working as soon as the case is filed.
And the portability is available so long as you're still currently working for your employer. Right. The portability is not available if you're voluntarily or voluntarily dismissed, right?
It is under certain conditions.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
So that's why we gotta talk to your immigration attorneys, and we'll help you discover those. Let's go to the next question. Okay, how long does my visa last? And I think this may be our last questions, and then we can go into the questions from the public. So how long does my visa last, the H-1B?
Yes, so initially it lasts for 3 years. 3 years that you can extend for another 3 years, so up to 6 years. Again, this is very general, and for some cases, let's say you already have a L1 visa, this may be shortened because you will have to remove some years. Let's say you use 2 years of L1, you won't be able to use 6 years of H-1B. So again, it's super important to check with an experienced attorney just in case, and make sure that you can extend the H-1B for up to 6 years.
That's a special rule, right? Because if you're using L1 for 2 years, that means that you can use of the 6 years in H-1B, you can only use 4, right? So there are some special situations like that. All right, let's go to some questions from the public. Let's start with Christopher Chung. Okay, are there certain industries related or other qualifications I should seek out prior to starting the application process? So I'm presuming it's H-1B. So are there certain industries related or other qualifications I should seek out prior to starting the application process? Let's presume that he is graduated from university, has a bachelor's degree.
That's a very tricky question. In my opinion, H-1B is open to many types of industry. What makes the difference is really the job itself. Whether the job itself requires a bachelor degree, at least in a specific field, not just a bachelor degree or a master degree, because having a master degree that is too broad wouldn't get you an H-1B. So it has to be very specific, and that's the main criteria. The industry is super broad. We have clients from very different industries,
Right.
technology, I mean everything. So
yeah, essentially, any industry that would require at least a bachelor's degree for the work to be performed can qualify for an H-1B. So we've even had the teachers for kindergarten or for grade school. It's and I mean those are very important roles, and also we've had very scientific jobs in engineering, in space technology, things like that. So it's really any job that requires at least a bachelor's degree for the job to be performed. And some jobs are a little bit iffy sometimes. So we try to make sure that we have enough evidence to show that it is normal in the industry to hire someone with a bachelor's degree in order to make this H-1B application successful. And let's go to thank you, Mr. Chang, for asking the question. Let's go to Francia Scaria.
To add something about the qualifications, you also need to make sure that you qualify for the job, meaning if the job requires a license for some reason, you need to get that license.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Besides the bachelor degree, you need to make sure that you do have enough proof that you can perform in that position.
Yeah, so I know some states require licenses for engineers. And so what we've done in those cases is that we've demonstrated that they can work under the main engineer of the company for at least a year's time, and then that is very likely they're going to receive that license by that point, so they can get that H-1B approved.
Right.
So that's one example. If you're going to be a doctor, you can also make this a similar argument as well. It can happen to lawyers too. We just have to show that the likelihood that you're going to get that license within a reasonable amount of time should allow you to get this H-1B approved. But thanks for bringing up that point. Another question from Florencia Scaria is, when is the next lottery?
Well, USCIS never makes promises. They're not saying that it's going to happen for sure in March next year, but in practice, it's been years that the lottery happens in March. Usually the first week of March, either March 1st and then March 20th. So you should be prepared for March next year. But everything can change at this point.
Right, and I think this year there was a date set for, I think it was the 21st, right, or the 19th of March, and then last minute, United States extends it till the following Monday.
Yes, they did. Yes,
right?
Due to some glitches on the website, they had to extend the registration window, which was great for clients, so they have enough time to register more potential employees.
Thanks, Sarah. So the USCIS is always kind of a little tricky. We can't pin them down, except that we know that get ready for March. At sometime March, we need to get you registered, and sometime in March, end of March, you'll know whether your case was selected. So Maria Camila Vasquez asks, can I extend my H-1B status? So we know that we can extend, to 3 years and giving you a total of 6 years, right? So tell us, Sarah, that what the extension process is like, and what happens after 6 years. Can you extend after 6 years? And that would give us a more insightful answer as well.
That's a good question. Thank you, Maria Camila, and thank you, Harry. So yes, the maximum amount of time that you can benefit from the H-1B initially is 6 years, unless, as I mentioned earlier, we mentioned about some exception if you had a L2, L1, or anything before. But let's pretend you never had any visa in the US before, so you can extend your H-1B up to 6 years. Then you may think, what's next? So what's next is probably the green card. If you're here for years and you are planning on staying here, you like it here, you have to think about the green card. And our recommendation is not to wait for year 5 or 6. You have to think about it actually the first year. What we I don't know if Harry want to talk about it, but we can mention there is another way to extend the H-1B while waiting for a green card application, which is the permanent labor certification. So
sure, I can provide a little bit of insight on that. So, and you can fill in my answer, Sarah. So essentially, this happens often to people from China and from India, where they have backlogs for issuing green cards. And it could happen to other people too if they wait until the last year, the 6th year, to apply for a permanent labor certification. But here's what happens. The typical case is a person from, say, India, many times highly educated, could be engineer or any field, but where their availability for permanent, the availability for green cards is essentially extended about 12 years. So if you're from India, you may be waiting 10, 12 years before a green card becomes available. And of course, H-1B life is 6 years. But if your employer filed the permanent labor certification and was successful in obtaining the I-140, the immigrant petition for an alien worker, that I-140 will serve as a reason to be able to extend the H-1B status beyond 6 years until green cards become available for that person. So China has had similar problems, but recently the years of waiting for green cards has been reduced for them. But for Indians, that country specifically, they've had a lot of waiting time, and so many of them opt to not just do EB2 or EB3s under the permanent labor certification, but those who have a certain level of for those who have extraordinary abilities, will opt for the EB1A. EB1A is where you're able to demonstrate that you have extraordinary abilities because you have a certain level of fame, or you're well published and you're well known in your industry, and you meet certain criteria. You could get a green card in probably about 3 years, as opposed to waiting 10 to 12 years. So this is a problem that has been more difficult for people from India, and somewhat for people from China. But again, anyone else, if you're waiting till the 6th year to request permanent labor certification, you're hurting yourself because it takes about 2 years for this process to complete. Isn't that right, Sarah? It takes about 2 years to complete?
Yes, at least 2 years. It may take longer. You may be lucky and have your cases approved faster, but on average, we can say that it's 2 years.
On average, yeah. And I know that some cases may go a little faster, 18 months, and whether it's qualifies as EB2 versus EB3, EB2 may come sooner than EB3. But these are all things you have to keep in mind when you're filing for the permanent labor certification. So yes, if you're an H-1B candidate or an H-1B holder, start talking to your employer now about permanent labor certification, because you're building a career in the United States. H-1B by design is not a permanent solution. So the permanent labor certification will give you that green card, and we'll make sure that you have a full career in the United States. And of course, if you're married, if you have a spouse from another country, your spouse will also get a green card too, by virtue of you being a green card holder. So let's take a look at the next. Looks like we have one more question before we end. Can I start from Tracy Chen? Can I start my perm process before my H-1B is active?
Yes, you can start your perm process at any time. The perm process is not doesn't depend on any other visa or even status in the US. You can have a perm while being outside of the United States, as long as you have a good faith job opportunity from a US employer.
That's right. So you don't have to have an H-1B to start the permanent labor certification. But the reason that typically you see an H-1B first being approved and then a permanent labor certification follows is because of an economic reason. The employer wants to make sure that they have a candidate ready and working before they make another big investment in the permanent labor certification. So because the permanent labor certification takes 2 years, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little less, it's a big investment of time. There's uncertainty as to how long the need for that employee will exist throughout the 2-year process. So most employers will want the certainty of an employee having an H-1B before they make that investment. So that's why you see that. But under the law, we can start a permanent labor certification. An employer can start this process at any time, regardless if the person's in the United States, regardless if the person has an H-1B. So it's just a matter of having a good communication with that American employer, expressing your wishes and moving forward. All right. Well, that's the end of our questions. Thank you to everyone who joined and listened to this, and I hope that this recording is really helpful. Sarah, thanks for being on this program again. And do you have any closing words, Sarah, or any last tips?
Thank you so much. No, last tips is just we shared a lot of advice, but I think the most important advice is to consult with an experienced immigration attorney. Those cases are very tricky and each case is different, but thank you for attending. Thank you, Harry, for having me.
Wonderful. All right. We'll see you next time, Sarah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.